But she's good at concealing it, right? Back in episode 1? Just be patient. I mean, coming from Frieren, that's interesting, to say the least. I mean, even Frieren couldn't really sense her, right? Back in episode 1? You know, I love this for both Frieren and Heiter. Okay, passage of time. I play again. Adorable. It's almost therapeutic, isn't it? Just to live, you know, with these characters. 4 years. It's not a good thing. 4 years since then. No. Wow. Okay. Yeah, the color palette certainly matches the tone and the mood all of a sudden, right? Downcast, moody. Oh, yes. Wow, not much of a reaction there. She's really quite dialed in. Yeah, that explains quite a bit. Oh my god. Imagine the grief. How come Heiter's up here though? Wow, even at this age. Hang on to those memories. Wow. To regret saving me. It's interesting, she looks at it. Okay, that's understandable. She's quite diligent, as established earlier on. Learn more than most people do in 10 years, right? To her, it's almost kind of transactional. You know, I'll get into it later on. Oh, God. I'm so happy there's 28 episodes of this. So much rich texture there, right? Wow. I mean, the music's got its hooks in me, man. Just there. Just made me sit up. Come on, Frieren. She finally gets it. Wow. I mean, that's quite the indicator of the relationship that they do have now, right? That's quite the request. Ooh, the sudden shift. Oh. Wow. Yeah, he noticed a change. Oh. Oh, look at that. She liked that, of course. She appreciates that. Compassion, kindness. Oh. Her little face, man. Oh. But you know, ah. I love the subtle smiles. Rest easy, man. I think, yeah, in the end. Wow. Wow. It didn't have to be magic. Wow. I've got another half of this. 26 years. In the Central Lands, still 26 years, so she's known Frieren for 6 years now. I like it. It's quite the practical application of magic as well, right? Feels grounded. So 2 years since Haiter died. Effective. Oh, quite a... She said that as quite a matter of fact. Hey. Familiar face. Oh, look at that. Whoa. The Balrog. Oh. The silhouette shot there. Outlined by the flames. The lasting legacy. The lasting impact. Yes. I love that he has a side to him. All right, she has the spell, right? Ah. The rust spell they just talked about. Handy. Oh, is that right? But she had a flash of Himmel at that moment, though. Wow. Time to go find them, then. I love that, though. All of a sudden, it triggered a memory. They all died out, eh? How about that? Oh, look at that. Just that beautiful animation. Doing this for myself. That's quite introspective there, Frieren. Oh, yes. Bit of a slob. Frieren, the big sister, or in the mom role. Oh. Look at this. Look at this, man. Come on. Wow. You know, I kind of felt like a sudden sting. 6 months, you know, now that Frieren has joined her, that hits a bit differently, doesn't it? Yeah, the old head. Hmm. Yeah, she really needed this. Oh, yes. Those smiles, man. My goodness.
わかったよ、フェルン。心配させてしまったね。
Oh, she's patting her head.
私一人に時間ってわけでもない。潮時だ。
There it is.
もう少し探したら切り上げるよ。もう少しって何年ですか？もう少しだよ。
Soon as soon.
あなたは本当に諦めが。
I like it. I like this. The Fern has that in her. It's good. It's good to have this dynamic. Her coat kind of reminds me of Hyter, right? His black overcoat. Hey, is that the goddess? Oh. Oh. Look at them, man. They just lit up. I think it's charming. Oh, look at this.
私の集めた魔法を褒めてくれたバカがいた。それだけだよ。くだらない理由ですね。そうだね。
I mean, it looked like all three of them appreciated that. Wow. Ooh. A blue petal?
花弁だね。
It might just be.
何箇所にも埋めるから、よく埋めた場所を忘れて。
I like that though. Oh, look at this.
そうげつそう。
僕の故郷の花でね、とても美しいんだ。いつか君に見せてあげたい。
Look at that. The tone just shifted there.
そう。機会があればね。
Oh.
あるとは思っていたけど、まさか。
Look at that. Look. Oh my god.
遅くなったね。ヒンメル。
Wow.
なんでそんなに魔法に一生懸命。
Still on that, eh?
理解できません。わかるはずだよ。フェルンだって魔法使いになることを諦めなかった。それは違います。私は一人で生きていける力さえ手に入れば何でもよかったのです。
It didn't have to be magic.
別に魔法じゃなく
Huh. The title, right?
ても魔法を選ぶ。
That's right. Here's that moment, eh? Oh.
そうですね。
Wow. There's that breakthrough she needed. Their magic makes the people they love happy. And that makes them happy, clearly, right?
忘れるところだった。よし。
Okay, so that's episode 2, and how's that? How's that for a bookend? You know, it's just perfect. Just simply perfect. It's beautiful and it's just heartfelt. And you know, the thing is, leading up to the final moments, I suppose the final sequence, and you know, the whole final sequence is just masterful. You know, just some top tier directing on showcase here, on display. But you know, even leading up to it, it's a really damn good episode. You know, it's a fantastic follow-up episode, right? And I'll get into that, of course, but then you get the final moments of the episode. It's tremendous. It's tremendous stuff, man. I mean, just that moment, the blue petal kind of shows up in the top of the frame and it kind of really, you know, brings it out of you. I saw that petal, the blue petal specifically, and, you know, I just immediately felt this excitement in my chest. And then, of course, you know, Frieren just shoots up, flies up her ascension to the top. But before I see the big reveal, it just beautifully cuts to the flashback once again, right? And listen, before I move on, the use of flashbacks is so impressive, right? Just in this one episode alone, right? But 2 episodes in now, yeah, it's just, it's a really good, really exciting thing to see. The use of the flashbacks, right? Just how tactfully they're being incorporated, you know, within the structure of this narrative, right? So meaningful and integral. And I love that it appears to be structuring them as 2 ongoing time frames. I mean, yeah, I feel like that much is clear at this point, 2 episodes in. You know, that the flashbacks are an ongoing journey as well, that I am going to get to see play out, that I am going to, get to tap into. And, again, alongside me, Frieren as well, right? It really feels like Frieren is experiencing both time frames or timelines, not timelines, time frames rather, at the same time, right? Even that right there is quite interesting, you know? I mean, yes, it's her recalling important memories. Or listen, they don't even have to be important. Not every single memory has to be important, right? But they can still be meaningful. But I love the structure of this. I love to see it. And yeah, it really kind of is checking out, some of my thoughts from episode one, right? The journey that she's already had and the new journey, right? That she's definitely on at this point, proper, alongside Fern, you know? So yeah, it's exciting stuff, man. I've got to say, I enjoyed that so much, and I'm just loving the narrative approach of this anime so far. But of course, speaking of the flashback, or the really significant portion of this flashback that it does cut to in those final moments, Himmel telling her about these really specific ones growing in his homeland, right? And that right there, I thought the voice acting is just fantastic by the voice actor for Himmel, right? The switch up, right? The shift from goofy and playful delivery of not as beautiful as I am, or not as beautiful as me, to a much more serious and somber and meaningful tone, right? That taking Frieren there would be a significant thing for Himmel. And even a little bit earlier, there's that one shot. I mean, you heard my reaction, you saw my reaction. You see, it's from Frieren's perspective, but it presents Himmel. You see only half of his face. I don't know. Immediate thought was, oh, look at this. This is almost romantic. I don't know. It just felt like that. To see Himmel from that, from that perspective, and just how it's presented, right? And again, he crowns Frieren as well. Though, of course, you see that both Heiter and Eisen are also partaking in all the good fun. That sequence right there, that moment, to see them just kind of let loose and have such a fun time. Especially to see Eisen like that as well. It's just beautiful stuff, man. And you see all of that is brought on because of Frieden's magic, right? Because before her magic, they show up to this broken down structure, right? Yet she lights it up. She injected life into it, right? And then again, of course, you see the outcome of it. It quickly cuts to all three of them, Eisen and Heiter together, and then of course, the solo shot of Himmel, right? And I love the little voice acting touch there. The moment she lights it up, all you hear is like, I think that was Heiter, right? I mean, there's a lot of really fantastic and wholesome and comedic voice acting as well. I noticed even in the little flashback, him posing for his statue, right? You see, I mean, you hear for a split moment, just Frieren's reaction is just so, I don't know, it's so goofy and just wholesome, I thought. I just really enjoy that kind of thing. But, going back to my point about Himmel's switch up, right, that he would love to show her someday, you could just hear it, right? It's really quite important to him, right? And, once again, that right there kind of lends itself to, that point I kind of made in episode one. I really truly felt that Himmel did have feelings for her, right? Again, he's fine with them not being reciprocated, perhaps, but I think this kind of, plays into that once again, second episode running now. But here it's a bit more direct, I'd say. This is my take on it 2 episodes in. I do feel, given the things that I've seen and experienced so far, yeah, I do feel that Himmel had feelings for her, right? Romantic feelings, I think. But yeah, the approach with the flashbacks, it has me really quite excited, I was really quite hopeful and kind of essentially expecting flashbacks, but the way they're actually being utilized here, cutting back and forth, the current journey and the journey that's already taken place, even though the journey might be taking place yet again, under a different circumstance for Frieren. And I'm speaking of the journey that she already had, the 10-year adventure that she had, Yeah, it's exciting stuff, man. It really is. Even though this is an individual that's been on that journey, she wasn't truly on that journey the first time round, right? So the exciting component of this is her actually going on two journeys at the same time, if that makes sense. But after he tells her about his hometown and that, he'd love to take her there someday, I love how it just cuts to Frieren's smile, that subtle smile. And that right there is all I needed to see to know that indeed she's seeing them, right? And I mean, just a few moments later, it shows me, it cuts to the wide shot, that incredible shot, right? Her hovering over it. It's just beautiful stuff, man. Like I said, every frame a painting, and that continues. This episode is full of it, just full of it. And like I said, you're going to have to get used to it, folks. This is the type of thing I really kind of eat up. I've always enjoyed photography, and that's always been something I've gravitated towards since the beginning. Since I first really, really got into film. That's a component of filmmaking that I really took a deep dive into. It took a massive interest in, alongside all of film, all aspects of film, but that specifically. But yeah, the thing is, many of you have been here for years, and you know this. I don't really need to explain it or get you ready for it. But you know about this, right? My love of photography and cinematography and art direction and all of that. But for anyone that's new, and there's plenty of you, I'm sure, yeah, this is something that really kind of gets me going. But going back to Frieden's subtle smile, and like I said, I just love those moments of her subtle smiles because to me they already kind of feel quite meaningful, right? Anytime she cracks a subtle smile, given Frieden's disposition as well. And you can see almost immediately that it lived up to the hype, right? That she does have an appreciation for these. And yeah, she's glad. You can see that she's glad, and I'm certainly glad. And I'm guessing and looking at it that Frieren is glad as well that they kind of, stayed on that. Even though Frieren, she lets it out. She lets it be known that you just don't know how to quit. But at that point, of course, Frieren is quite sure that, these seed rats are going to lead them to something, right? So she was sure that, they're going to wrap up after this anyways. And, that right there is another beautiful moment, right? Her realizing that she's not just spending her time anymore, right? And she's really quite accepting of that. But, the thing is, like I said, even leading up to this grand finale, the episode is already quite fantastic and just full of stuff, full of brilliant stuff, and again, the cuts of animation. Oh my goodness, man. I mean, you go all the way back to, Fern kind of finally stepping up, right? My goodness, the build up to that. And like I said, it's as if the score, the sound design, it all had its claws in me, and it just kind of, launched me up. It kind of pulled me up, right? And of course, there's a stunning animation as it crescendos and she launches it. And of course, I see a little bit later on that she is successful as Frieren takes it in, right? Wow. That's just one moment. So yeah, of course, the animation continues to impress here in episode 2, be it the epic or the subtle, right? Not everything has to be grandiose and epic, right? It's just as meaningful, right? Just as impressive if it's the simple stuff. And that's clearly quite important for the tone of this anime specifically as well, right? Again, given everything I get to experience in episode 1 and it being made quite clear the type of pacing this is, it's a slow burn, right? It's a slice of life. It does need simplicity, right? And subtlety, living in the moment, showing and animating the mundane moments as well, right? As they traverse through a forest and actually showing me that, right? Actually spending time animating that and just showing, again, the most mundane things. And again, it's not flashy or anything, but that one moment I pointed out, Frieren had the leaf in her hand. That's beautifully animated. Nothing flashy, nothing grandiose, but I think just as impressive. And then beyond that, just the static frames are quite meaningful as well, right? And on a few occasions I see houses, the exterior shots of houses, but there's just, I don't know, there's emotion attached to it, right? Especially that one shot deep in the forest and you see Heiter's cabin, right? As it's kind of ending that chapter, right? a goodbye to Haiter. Though, later on, there's a beautiful tribute to Haiter. I mean, listen, I by the end of this episode, or even throughout this episode, I felt such great respect for that character, Haiter, right? And the things I've seen, over the span of these 2 episodes now, especially in this episode. And again, there's telltale signs that I'll be seeing much more of Haiter as well through flashbacks. So that's exciting. That puts me at ease that, I haven't really truly seen the last of him. And then you see that the really rich color design comes into play as well, right? Almost kind of allowing you to smell the soil in the forest, right? The trees of the forest. I really felt that the lush beauty of the lands or the areas they're traversing through, really come alive in this episode. But then it's just as effective with the moody and the dreary, right? Heartbreaking shots even, such as little Fern in that flashback on the edge of darkness, on the edge of death, right? And you see the framing, the composition of it, alone and empty. And little Fern just by herself until she's not by herself anymore, right? Her guardian angel steps in, hides her. And that just changes everything for both of them, right? For both of them. But yeah, I've got to say, that's a fantastic follow-up episode. It really is. It's beautifully paced and structured. It covered a lot of ground in that runtime, right? Yet it still it strikes that perfect balance, right? Of maintaining that charm, that really distinct charm that I felt throughout the runtime of episode 1, and then that really deliberate flow that I also get to experience throughout episode 1, right? It's all there, right? And speaking of things being there, the production values continue to impress, and then some. I mean, the immaculate vibes continue, right? The meditative approach continues, full of that sweet melancholy, right? Like I said, it really is such a joy to spend time with these characters, right? To just be in their company as they get to have quality time with each other as well, And I love that Haiter and Frieren had these 4 years together in the end, Again, for Frieren, 4 years might be, a snap of a finger, but, Haiter getting those 4 years, at the last stages of his life, is incredible. It's an incredible thing that happened for him. And, I feel so, I don't know, man. I just feel so good about how Haiter got to spend the final years of his life, right? Surrounded by someone he cared for quite a bit, and another person that he just recently begins to care for, right? And develops quite a bond with. And of course, I am speaking of Fern, young Fern, who isn't really all that young, by the end of this episode, by the time I get to the second half of this episode. But yeah, going back to my initial point, like I was saying, there is just something so charming and therapeutic about these moments spent together, right? The day-to-day, the ordinary. It really is, I don't know, just sitting through that episode, it just, I kind of lost track of time. I did, and anytime you feel that you don't want it to end, right? You kind of really had this transportive experience, that's always a really good sign for me, at least. And I'm sure for many of you as well. And that's how I felt, right? That I just want to keep spending time in these moments. And, the deliberate approach of the pacing, and the passage of time as well, right? Isn't it quite striking how it can actually be quite deliberate in how, slow burn of an approach it is to then have that jarring experience of those time skips, right? They continue into this episode as well, but again, not as substantial as the time skips from episode 1, right? As expected, of course, given that now you have young Fern, right? It's all relative, isn't it? There is still quite a substantial time jump if you look at it from Fern's perspective, perhaps, a human's perspective. But, again, if you compare it to some of those colossal time jumps I get to experience in episode 1, it kind of checks out, doesn't it? And like I said, even in episode 1, I don't expect the time jumps to be colossal. And at some point, I am kind of expecting it to find its footing, right? The sweet spot. And at that point, or from that point on, I don't think there's going to be too many of these, time skips that are years at a time, right? I think as it's going to play on, throughout the 28 episodes, and then of course beyond into season 2 as well, I feel like it's really going to settle in, right? And focus on really focus on a portion of Fern's life. But, once again, going back to the production side of things, my goodness, the art direction, the backgrounds and photography just hold up the standard of the first episode. That was the main question I had. This is such an incredible bar, such an incredible standard that I'm seeing on display throughout episode 1, that it'll be really quite interesting to see if it can hold that standard, right? So far, so good, right? And I'd say, the sound design and the original score and the color design are, standouts as well in this particular episode. As you know, I've kind of, switched into a bit of a different approach for my post-episode portion, this portion. And I like to, pick and choose frames from the episode itself. And, just of course, sometimes, I can't go into every single frame, but the fact that I pick a frame, I'm not picking frames at random. If the frame is in the post-episode portion and it's accompanying, these discussions, there's thought into that. I've really taken to a specific frame. And I feel like, sometimes indirectly, without actually speaking about some of these frames, if I don't get a chance to do so, I feel like just the display of them or displaying them, it kind of also gives you my thoughts, right? On the things that really kind of captured my attention, the things that really kind of stood out to me. But of course, I'll kind of come back to the sound design and the original score for a different section of this episode as well. But yeah, I kind of get to see a bit more of the external world of the narrative, right? And it's great to see the development on the internal side as well. And by that, I mean the psychological realm, right? Though again, it'll be interesting to see if there is a much more specific nemesis character archetype that exists for Frieren, right? The foil character. Though again, you can also kind of argue or, present the point that in a sense, someone like Fern is actually the foil character, or at least one foil character to Frieren, right? I really quite enjoyed the dynamic that these two have, especially in the second half of the episode. A much older Fern. This is not a meek individual. You really kind of get to see much more of Fern's personality on display, right? And that's great. That's great. Just the notion of these two spending time together for a long, long time, spending their lives together, perhaps, right? Again, it's quite relative, isn't it? Looking at the two different perspectives. And then again, like I mentioned, maybe I should finish that thought. I know there is another character, right? I've seen it on the cover. So it'll be interesting to see once this character is introduced into the dynamic. But, just these two together, I'm so excited, man. I'm just so excited to see them spend time together, over the years and decades, right? Like I said in episode 1, Frieren is probably going to spend the rest of Fern's life with her. But, circling back to my point about, the possibility of a much more specific nemesis character archetype for Frieren, yeah, the physical and the psychological dynamics of that could be interesting as well, which can provide opposition for our protagonist, right? And, not just opposition in the traditional sense either, perhaps Frieren's own nature and history as an elf could come into play as well, right? Potential negative impulses and traits, which she might have confined to her unconscious, right? The shadow self, perhaps. But yeah, by the end of that episode, you can see that Frieren has a newfound perspective and understanding that this is not truly the end, right? That Himmel continues to be with them, right? Through his actions and his lessons even, right? He certainly continues to inform their path even now, right? And it's just so damn lovely to see the smile on Frieren's face, right? That is such a comforting thought to hear. It's what Himmel, the hero, would have done. And how about that line of dialogue, right? You see that it certainly informed Heiter's actions as well. So at such a late stage in his life as well, right? It's never too late. It's never too late to make a change within, right? To take a different approach, perhaps. Haiter's catalyst in this unique case being Fern. Fern coming into his life at this late stage of his life, right? More on that later. But this idea of Himmel's actions and his lessons, informing their path and informing Frieren's path. I think this certainly applies to Heiter as well. And then at some point, Eisen, right? Himmel might be center stage at the moment, but the other two had something quite unique to bring to the table as well for Frieren, right? The impact they've had on her and how important they are to her as well, right? And, on that note, Eisen is the only one left now, right? So surely that reunion is on the cards quite soon. And I'm really quite interested in seeing the dynamic of that specific reunion. I'm actually quite excited, right? Especially with Fern by Frieren's side now, right? And how Eisen might react to this, right? The idea of the ones closest to her potentially observing the changes within her is something I'm quite excited about, and I've been excited about since episode 1, right? And you see some beautiful moments of that, subtle moments. This anime really does subtlety well, doesn't it? I think one of the standout moments for me, and again, it's a subtle moment. If you even blink or look away from the screen for a split moment, you might miss it, right? It's a shot of sorry, I'm mixing other names here. Heiter, the shot of Heiter as he lays in bed and he's listening to Frieren, right? And you see that reaction on his face. Again, beautifully animated, right? Those subtle reactions have to be animated quite effectively to sell that notion of subtle, changes in the face, be it through the eyes, a little smirk, a little smile, right? There's a lot of that going on in this anime. So yeah, impressive animation doesn't always have to be flashy. It can be quite the opposite as well. Subtle animation, character acting animation is just as impressive. And of course, I'm going to circle back to that moment, right? It's a big moment. Again, Frieren by his bedside, imploring him to, make peace, to have a proper goodbye between himself and Fern. Allow Fern to properly say goodbye to him, right? Because Frieren understood the dynamic. She sees just how much, Fern cares for Heiter, has taken to Heiter, and how much Heiter has taken to Fern and cares for Fern, as if she was his own daughter, perhaps, right? Frieren has picked up on these dynamics in her time, with the both of them, right? Again, more on that later. Let's kind of take a look at Frieren's small gestures rather than the grandiose acts of heroism, right? The types Fern kind of alluded to. Instead, it's small acts of kindness that can bring comfort, right? Like the ones she does for the sweet old lady who had such fond, everlasting memories of Himmel the hero, right? And through this, both Frieren and I get to experience firsthand the lasting impact of Himmel the hero, right? The mark he left on the world, the people he endeared himself to, right? And I'm certain I'll get to see this type of interaction many more times throughout the 28 episode journey, right? Even for all the others, right? Frieren herself, Eisen, Heiter. But, returning to the initial point, after episode 1, I felt that he must have endeared himself to many on their travels, right? And I get a prime example of it through a couple of poignant flashbacks in this episode, right? I'll leave, Heiter's flashback for a bit later, but let's look at the sweet old lady first, right? This sweet old lady who used to be a sweet little kid around the time Himmel left an everlasting mark on her life, right? Eternal respect and gratitude. I mean, you see that she has such fondness for Himmel that getting the statue cleaned up and restored was at the top of her list, right? As far as getting help from Frieren. She does specify that the rest of the villagers don't really care about this all that much anymore. And listen, that's completely fine. These are people who have difficult lives, right? Many of them just kind of have to live day to day, day by day, doing their thing. So it's understandable that most of them don't care about some statue, right? But this old lady does have a unique attachment to that specific statue and the memory of the great person it's based on. But let's take a more focused approach on the flashback to the herbalist as a child, because this is a standout moment of the episode as well. I mean, the episode's full of standout moments. And there's many more to discuss, but let's focus on this for now. I mean, the shots of the creature, right? Reminiscent of the Barlog. Beautiful art style used in its depiction. You know, the dancing in unknown shapes, in the raging fire as it emerges. I mean, it's just really quite interesting and dynamic stylistically. You know, the whole sequence of the creature closing in and engulfing the young child in its darkness. And then Himmel the hero swoops in and keeps as shadow the darkness at bay, right? A shining light cutting through the darkness. I love that this core memory is presented in that really distinct manner, right? Like I stated, a shining light cutting through the darkness. And how about that out of focus silhouette shot of Himmel? My God. I mean, you saw my initial reaction to that, man. The raging fire behind him utilized as the lighting source to outline him, right? It's just brilliant stuff, man. Yeah, I think I'm going to get a lot of great stuff in this anime artistically. But yeah, you know, all of this kind of comes together to really reiterate the larger than life status, right? A mythical hero, Himmel the hero. And Frieren gets to experience this firsthand now, right? Because this is, again, essentially the first time she's kind of going back or coming across people, at least on screen for me as an audience member, that she's coming across these people and kind of getting to just learn to see the impact Himmel made all that time ago, and they made as well. You know, like I said earlier, Himmel might be center stage, but the focus is going to be on Heiter at some point, on Eisen, and again, Frieren herself. But that being said, on the other side, or on the flip side, I loved the other side of Himmel, or another side of Himmel, perhaps, in that fun little flashback, right? I get to see the vanity, once again, of Himmel, the hero, right? I get to see a bit of that in episode 1 as well, right? I see it on multiple occasions in this episode, in these flashbacks. Himmel being a goof, just being full of himself. And, I just love that he's not written as just a bland depiction of someone completely heroic and nothing else beyond that, right? I think that clearly makes him a much more interesting character, right? Though even then, it's interesting that Heiter considers him as straight as an arrow, right? Earlier in the episode. And, just really quickly before I move on, just, this beast, this monster, being in a village, I don't know, something about that I don't know if that's just a common occurrence, in these lands. I don't know, it didn't quite feel like that, but something about that creature being there, it feels off. Why exactly is a creature such as that in these lands, right? I mean, how exactly does it even get here, At least that's my thought at the moment, it just kind of felt a bit out of place. And not out of place in a writing sense, just actually technically it being in this part or in this area, just kind of terrorizing a village. So, I'm sure I'll get answers to my question at some point. I'm sure there's something there. There's a reason this creature ends up here. Let's kind of look at Heiter's request of Frieren to leave this place today, that he doesn't want Fern to experience the blow of losing anyone else. And you can immediately see and understand where he's coming from. It's not hubris. Heiter is saying this because those two have bonded and come to care for each other, right? And, one of the things I'm quite excited about is simply just learning more about Heiter through Fern. Just simple stuff, the time that they had together. And of course, in turn, Frieren is going to have that lovely experience of getting to hear some more about her late friend Heiter, right, through Fern. It's beautiful how I can come full circle, just thinking about that, it just brings a smile to my face that, Frieren is going to learn much more about Heiter. And clearly, this episode establishes that Heiter made quite the effort for Fern, right? Changed a lot of things. He took on a lot of things. He learned new things for Fern's sake, right? More on that in a bit, but returning to my original point, leaving it off in that manner, on that note, would have felt empty, right? For both him and Fern. The type of emptiness and regret that could linger for a lifetime, the type of thing that keeps you up at night 10, 15 years later. right? The thought of both Heiter and Fern heading towards something similar really hit her in that moment. Frieren, that is. It just really kind of brought all those feelings right up. So Frieren being the one to get emotional in that moment and imploring Heiter to cherish these final moments in time so there is closure. It really is quite a heartwarming thing, given how she felt after Himmel's passing and the regrets she had or she felt. And yeah, to see Frieren being brought to tears over this really is quite the striking moment, right? As an audience member, and then for Heiter as well. I alluded to this earlier. Heiter gets to see the change within his longtime friend, right? It's a beautiful moment. It really is to see that, to know that Heiter gets to see this and experience this as well. But, speaking a bit more on Heiter's compassion, a quiet retirement just wasn't on the cards for him, was it? Because he realized it was imperative that he live by Himmel's example, that it's his responsibility to live up to that, right? As it flashes back to Himmel with the two children and seeing firsthand just how important that compassion and kindness was for these two likely newly orphaned children, right? And that stuck with him. Just a simple gesture, a kind gesture. And then, of course, the catalyst for Heiter's change, the shift within ends up being Fern. And ultimately, this is how he honored Himmel, right? And this was his way of keeping the memory of his late friend alive as well. And it's such a beautiful and effective and simple writing choice, isn't it? Simple yet so effective. This notion of carrying these memories with you. Because in doing so, you keep these people alive. You keep just the ideas of these people alive, these people that you care for so much, right? You see from Frieren's side or her end, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, a totally new perspective on things as far as, Himmel is concerned. Just in the last episode, she felt so bamboozled. It felt like such a sucker punch, right? That all of a sudden, she just, she can't remember anything. She barely knew him. But it turns out, memories are a beautiful thing. They're a funny thing, especially because they could pop up in the most random moments, or they can be triggered by the most random moments. And this is true for all of us, isn't it? Right? All of us are full of memories. Some of them are always there at the fore, but then some are, hidden until they're not, right? Until they're triggered by something really unique, a unique smell, a unique flavor, a really unique reoccurring moment. And I see an example of that, beautifully executed at that in this episode, right? And beautifully depicted as well, the sudden flash of Himmel in Frieren's mind as the notion of, lighting the place up a bit, lighting the statue or the surrounding area around the statue up a little bit, right? With color. At that moment, it really unlocks and triggers a unique and specific moment, right? And there's going to be a lot of this. I can just tell there's going to be a lot of this for Frieren, right? And, you see there is a calm that kind of takes over. By the end of this episode, I think, Frieren begins to realize even that, maybe I did know a bit more about Himmel than I initially thought. Much more about Himmel than I initially thought. Right? She just so effortlessly goes into this idea of him, being picky and he had it coming. He deserves this, right? The statue and all of that, the condition of the statue, the state of the statue. Yeah, I'm really quite excited to see more of this. Her slowly, really just remembering all of these things, right? And these trips down memory lane are essentially the best solution for all of this, because running into people, going into places, familiar people, and familiar situations like the one that I see in this episode, right? The sweet old lady and, her connection to Himmel and her Frieren being there at the time as well. These are the types of moments that are going to allow Frieren to come to terms with her understanding and relation with Himmel, right? One of her good friends alongside Heiter and Eisen. And, like I said in episode 1, forming new moments, new memories with Fern, right? Going on a journey with Fern, and just simply on their travels, these kind of moments are going to unlock other memories as well. Okay, so I think it's time to take a deeper look at the magic in this story, right? Because this episode does kind of give me some substantial stuff about it, right? Some really interesting stuff about it, right? The presentation of it, the feel of it, the responsibility of it, the practical application of it, and the charm of it, right? I mean, Fern really wanted to understand Frieden's obsession with magic, right? To the point that she was kind of becoming frustrated at one point. I thought it was a great little half episode plot, Fern struggling with that aspect of it, and then ultimately there being such a fulfilling breakthrough moment for her, right? Coming to terms with this aspect of it, you see that relief just kind of wash over her, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all just so simple. It was all so simple, right? She kept overthinking it, and Frieren kind of helps her. She guides her to that realization. But yeah, I get to learn some of the fundamentals as Frieren takes up the mentor role, right? The master and apprentice dynamic at play. And it's a beautiful sight. It really is. It's like it felt special because it's clearly the beginning of a beautiful, beautiful relationship and dynamic that's going to play out. Frieren and Fern, right? But, going back to the fundamentals, the 3 factors essential to mages, right? And long-range magic is a combination of these, apparently. And of course, she kind of goes into certain things, certain elements, things that are difficult for most or many, yet, Fern clearly excels in one aspect of it more so than most, right? And that's been made clear in episode 1 as well. And, as you saw in my reaction, I've got to say, I really like the depiction of Fern's magic, right? The beam she launches, it's such a distinct aesthetic, right? And then, of course, on top of that, you've got that tremendous sound design, right? It's such a unique output, just kind of pierces through you. And all of these elements, audio and visual, kind of come together and portray magic, or at least this specific type of magic, as something really heavenly and unearthly, right? An ethereal phenomenon. There's a really incredible wide shot of Fern's beam, right? It almost kind of looks like this energy doesn't quite belong here, right? The look of it, the striking contrast in the manner it's drawn and presented, right? Against the backdrop. As if, there's this tear in the fabric of reality, But then a bit later, I get to see a much more subtle depiction of magic as well, a more grounded and whimsical approach, perhaps. Simple and practical applications of magic, just assisting with mundane tasks, such as levitating pumpkins, right? A cup of warm tea, right? Removing rust from a statue or conjuring a beautiful field of flowers, right? Be it in that lovely flashback or in the conclusion of this episode around Himmel's statue. And I've got to say, I also really like the concept of acquiring certain spells and meeting certain requisites before getting to add them to your arsenal, I suppose. You need to see something, observe, perhaps even physically, before being able to conjure it through a spell, right? Some really cool ideas here. But, kind of going back to the notion of the responsibility of magic and, Fern's feelings on how Frieren's phenomenal talents as a seasoned mage should be utilized, that she's a mage who possesses the power to save many people, right? That she shouldn't spend her time searching for something that doesn't exist, right? Mundane things and all of that. To young Fern, it just feels like a complete waste of time and effort, right? And just her skill set, Frieden's skill set as a mage, right? Given how accomplished she is. And of course, speaking, from that perspective, Heiter, Heiter knew just how accomplished Frieren is, and through that, spending time with such an accomplished mage actually gave him, an understanding, perhaps a foundational understanding, and then he kind of makes the effort to build on that for Fern's sake. But it gives him that understanding, or gave him that understanding, of kind of recognizing some telltale signs of a good mage, right? Or the potential of a good mage. And again, that's Fern, young Fern, right? He's able to kind of pick and see, or pick out those telltale signs, and kind of lock in on those and help her from that point on. But kind of going back to the initial point, her phenomenal talents as a seasoned mage, and how Fern thinks that should be utilized. Yeah, sure. I'm sure Frieren probably is going to be doing that as well at some point, and perhaps even alongside Fern, right? But the fact that she chooses to spend her time and talents in this manner, it really is quite interesting, isn't it? As discussed a little bit earlier, right? The thing is, she completely agrees with Fern that some of her reasoning is rather silly. And I love that Frieren just accepted that. And of course, in a beautiful full circle moment, it becomes rather clear as well for Fern, right? As it cuts to that beautiful, beautiful moment of her just doing simple magic for Heiter. That right there is just, 2 episodes in, one of the best moments of the entire story for me. I know it's only 2 episodes, but still. Just seeing, Fern's face lit up, and then Heiter's face lit up as well, right? Just at a different point in his life, at a different age, yet he's still so enthralled by simple magic, right? You see Heiter at 2 different stages of his life, right? In the flashback, him and Eisen really, really kind of enjoying Frieren's magic, right? They really appreciate it, and of course Himmel as well, as it cuts to all of them. And they're having a blast in the field, just really taking it all in, right? And Frieren understands that, and it stays with Frieren, right? It makes them happy. It makes the people she cares about happy, and in turn, that makes her happy, right? And Fern comes to the same conclusion. That's why it's such a fulfilling breakthrough moment for her by the end of it, right? And the thing is, Frieren actually understood this in episode 1, right? In the conclusion of episode 1, that smile on her face after she gets a reply from Fern. I think then and there, Frieren just knew, right? And then you see throughout this episode, I think I even mentioned, she said this as quite a matter of fact, that, they're the same. Frieren knew for sure. She understood Fern. And then, she kind of allows Fern to reach that conclusion, kind of helps her, guides her to that conclusion as well, right? That, it didn't have to be magic, but you did choose magic, right? You made the choice. But a little bit earlier, Fern talking to Frieren about her concerns and feelings on the matter directly, after having a much needed chat with a third party, right? But also someone who is able to provide some great insight and direction to young Fern, right? The sweet old lady does quite a bit for Fern, I'd say, in that moment, right? Because again, the old head, she understood Fern's conundrum, right? Sometimes you just need to put it out there, right? Speak it out loud for someone. And in this case, someone quite experienced in life who can give you a perspective on your circumstances or conundrums. And I really do like that Fern has this in her. She has this in her to be combative if she feels strongly about something, and to ultimately voice her opinions to Frieren, right? So like I said a little bit earlier in the beginning of this discussion, it's great to see this. It's really good to see this now, that their dynamic will have this happen from time to time. And this immediately kind of goes into the next point, Frieren's new approach and examples of her trying, like trying to understand Fern's perspective, or rather, actually understanding her perspective. Frieren buying into the fleeting nature of her human traveling companion's life, right? Or rather, time, experiencing it as they do, as Fern does. And there's stuff like her patting Fern's head, something she's never been a fan of, as indicated in episode 1. But here she is, just naturally turning to that gesture, because it comes so naturally with Fern. In that moment, she felt the need to reassure Fern, and that, that gesture, that physical touch, it just naturally came about. And there's no hesitation there. And I think at the same time, she must have a better understanding for, why exactly Heiter used to do it as well, right? A lot of these things, these types of things, yeah, they kind of take on a different meaning later in life, don't they? Certain gestures and certain things that people did or used to say. But yeah, it was great to have the focus be on Fern and her recent past, right? And the origins of this sense of duty she feels towards Heiter. As throughout the episode, young Fern tackles the process of identifying so many things, right? Be it figuring out what's important to her, the indifference towards magic, as she initially kind of, believed and thought, but then gaining a better understanding as to why it became so important to her, or ultimately why exactly it ended up being magic, right? Like I said, that shot of young Fern doing magic for Heiter is just, it's so precious. It's just the most perfect representation of this episode, you know? And I thought it's a beautiful tribute to the late Heiter as well, who does end up passing on peacefully, knowing that Fern is with the right person, that Fern is capable, and that she'll be just fine. And yes, the episode begins with Frieren taking on the mentor role proper, but before any of that, Heiter plays a big role in Fern's education and training as a young mage, right? He made the effort, and they do spend time together before, Frieren took over her training. And even in episode 1, Frieren was actually surprised that Heiter gave Fern great direction about the rock having to be hit from that distance, right? She was about to say it, and then, Fern launches that beam. So, there's an indication there that, Heiter really put in the effort. But, Frieren also thought that she's studying too hard, right? Frieren recognizes it as a taxing approach, right? Though, of course, she didn't quite know at the time. Fern has her reasons for this approach. Essentially, she was against the clock, right? Becoming something before Heiter passes, so she can give him the peace of mind that he won't be leaving her in a state where she can't look out for herself. But also beyond that, I think it's also clear that it's just also in her nature to be diligent and dialed in. But yeah, Fern ends up putting in overtime to beat the clock. And, I kind of touched up on this earlier, but in her young mind, it's almost transactional as well. But, I'm kind of, I'm kind of not on that. Let's kind of continue and see how this kind of develops, I suppose. But, believing that she now had the responsibility to prove that Heiter was right to save her, or rather she actually was worthy of saving, right? It's a double-edged sword, because since she's so dialed in, so focused on becoming something before he passes, she's essentially missing out on quality time in his final days, right? And Heiter just thought that she's missing all the time in training because she must love magic so much. But yeah, ultimately I think it's more so about giving Heiter the peace of mind that he won't be leaving her in a state, where she can't look out for herself, that, that she is going to be self-sufficient. And also, this notion of I don't want him to regret saving me. Yeah, I suppose by being saved by Heiter, she understands that Heiter feels responsibility for her, right? Hence the bit about he always feared dying and leaving me alone. He just didn't have something like this in his carefree and blissful life before, right? If you look at it from Fern's perspective. So, maybe that's where this notion of it also being transactional kind of comes into my mind, looking at from her young perspective as well. But also the peace of mind about Frieren as well, that his longtime friend and traveling companion, he now knew that she has Fern by her side as well now, right? And he understood Fern enough to know that she can be good for Frieren, and that ultimately, a bit of him is going to continue traveling with Frieren, right? It's just I think it's rather beautiful. And, this notion of, keeping memories alive, if you have memories within you, carry them, keep them alive, keep the memory of the people you care for alive and honor them. Look at this, right? Fern is going to do just that. She is going to carry the memory of Heiter alive. And, through that, it's going to be so beneficial for Frieren as well, right? Because like I said earlier, I certainly hope that both, Frieren and I get to learn more about Heiter through Fern as well, right? I was hopeful for something like this, in my discussion for episode 1. The new experiences and memories she creates with any new traveling companions, and of course, Fern being the first one here, essentially, end up evoking memories and experiences from her time with her old party, right? And shed light and meaning and a newfound appreciation for those moments, right? Recontextualize. And I get just that in this second episode. But yeah, I think that should do it for this one, folks. The thing is, I do kind of get to see a bit more of a glimpse into Frieren's nature. And that includes being a slob, being disheveled and, needing to be taken care of from time to time, right? I mean, she's half asleep as Fern brushes her hair, right? I mean, yeah, at this point, Frieren knows Fern for a few years, but, this side of her feels like a long time thing, rather than her just allowing herself to be a slob in front of Fern all of a sudden, just because they've spent a few years together. It didn't feel like that. This feels like something that's been a thing, that is just a character thing. I mean, sure, it could be a bit of comedic relief, but one thing is really quite unique about Frieren, right? The lack of urgency, right? Yes, things are changing now. They are. But, she spent a long time of her life with a lack of urgency. But at the end of the day, I thought it's kind of charming, to see this side of Frieren as well. And now you've got Fern, again, I almost said young Fern, but she's out here being like a mom, a sister, older sibling to Frieren at times, right? So the dynamic here is just beautiful, I think. But for a third time, let me actually finish up my point about the third character that's on the Blu-ray cover, right? It'll be really fascinating to see how the dynamic shifts a bit, once this character comes in. I believe he's got like a red coat on. So, I mean, I'm excited for that, of course, but, I'm really, really enjoying just Frieren and Fern together, right? And I hope I get a bit more of that, much more of that, before that third party member joins up at some point. I suppose technically that is a bit of a spoiler that I ran into, but it's on the cover. So some things you kind of have to just look at. But yeah, I'll wrap it up on that note. If you enjoyed that, please consider dropping a like. Please consider dropping some comments. Give me your thoughts. If you are interested in early access or full opacity or full length, timer-based full length, of course, then please consider checking out the Patreon page and then, of course, potentially supporting the channel as well in the process of it all. The links are in the description and the pinned comment, also links to social media. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, for this second episode of Frieren, and I do hope to see you again soon for the next one. Until then, take it easy.